Good morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids and cubs, and welcome to season 5 and episode number 778. It is, yes, of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Do. Always 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is Monday, November 3rd, 2025, already into the 11th month of the year. And it looks like it will be a nice day here at the Beaver Lodge, although it might be a little cool. I am, well, as one would expect for this time of the year, of course. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, he, Mr. Beaver, hey. And not with me, as usual, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Kids and cubs, how is your mental health doing today? I thought of coming to the show dressed all in black, mourning, because, well, unfortunately, the Jays did not win the World Series over the course of the weekend. But, when you think about it, uh, we had a lovely ride, one that was not expected, especially when we were in, I think it was May, when the Jays were not doing as well as they did in the latter portion of the season. Um, we had a great World Series, went to 7 matches. We had the match that went to 18 innings. The final match went to extra innings. And then we had a whole bunch of weirdness as well. That thing that happened, I think it was in, I can't remember which game now, where what people got caught between the bases because they didn't hear whether or not it was a ball or a strike. And something like that happened again. And the ball getting stuck between the back pads and the ground, and then them deciding that it was not a home run. And then the last match, when um, Will Smith from the Dodgers managed to get the Jays player, I can't remember which one, out at the plate, like a quarter of a second difference. It had to go to the slow-mo replay to see whether or not, because his foot actually came off the home plate, but then went back down on it, and it was ruled out. It's just so many times it seemed like it was won in that last game, all the way down till the end. And it's like all that we needed was 5 more strikes. 5 more strikes, and it would have been done. But it was not to be. However, like I said, a great ride, unexpected ride, and we got to see real team play. A group of guys that seemed to really, really like each other and really believed in each other and were inspired and took it as far as they could. I'm saddest most for Ernie Clement because I've seen the quotes from him saying that, this is the most fun he's ever had playing baseball in his entire career, and he's never, had that type of chemistry with a group of guys, even ever like more than with any other group. And and you could tell by the way he performed in the postseason. Oh my God, just he was just hitting everything. So I I wanted it for him the most actually. Watching the last few of them, all the matches in this particular series and the last few ones with the Mariners. But like I said, it was not to be. But with that said, boys, you made a nation absolutely proud and brought us all together for a good time, even though it wasn't a long time. And that's not something about which to mourn. And there's always next year, right? So thank you for the very, very, very happy memories. And we'll just forget about the part that we didn't win at all this time. We'll just ride on the wonderful memories and the good vibes and everything that we had going for us during that period. It was magical. And hey, listen, I'm not even a baseball fan, to be totally honest, and I got into it. I really did. So, what more could you want? What more could you want? We had a beautiful time, win or lose. So, thank you. Thank you. And thank you to all the Canadians that really got in on this and jumped in and created that beautiful mood that we got to bathe in for a long while there. Well, long while, short while, but uh, we got to bathe in those waters as long as we possibly could. Look, they even gave us some extra innings in game seven, right? The fun was so good, we extended it. So that's the way I choose to look at it, put that frame on it, a little bit more of a positive, happy perspective. But that seems to be the case all around, as well as the attitude. I've been watching a lot of social media posts, and from all sources, it seems to be, hey, you know what? You didn't win it, but man, that was quite a ride. Thanks so much. So it seems to be a I'm sure there are some people out there that are saying negative things and whatnot, but I have, for as negative a place as social media is, I have yet to actually encounter uh, somebody saying something that's put down or very negative with regard to that. It seems that everybody is disappointed, but overall, that seems to be the general consensus that it was a good thing, regardless of the end result. So we just dust. Take our caps and, well, you don't have to put them in storage right away until next season. You can still wear them proudly for a while to celebrate what was done. I mean, they still won the division pennant. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. All right. Also today, kits and cubs, it is election day in Yukon. So that is very important if you happen to be there. And I know that we do have some listeners from Yukon because I see you sometimes in the comments on YouTube. So talk a little bit about you today. Kits and cubs, before we go on, however, I need to give you a couple of programming notes. Today is going to be probably a shorter show because I have to be on a bus relatively early to Toronto. I have a quick in and out. I have some concert tickets tonight, so I got permission to be away from rehearsals as well. But an artist that I really like, her name is Sophie Ellis Bextor. I'm not sure if you know her, but if you know the song "Murder on the Dance Floor," which was really popular in that movie Saltwire that came out a few years ago, it's actually a 20-year-old song. I think when it came out, and it got a second life and went global. But it was a song 20 years ago, back when I was in my clubbing days. That shaked my little tail to a lot. So I've been a Sophie Ellis Bextor fan for a long time, and she has never been so big that she was able to do a tour in North America. And with what happened with Murder on the Dance Floor, that created the opportunity. So for the first time ever in North America, for concerts. So I made sure to snap up a ticket because it might be my first and only chance to see her. So I will be doing that tonight. Chances are there will not be a show tomorrow morning because at 6 something in the morning I will be on a train back, so I won't be able to do a show live. However, If I'm not able to pre-record something for tomorrow morning, we will have a Daily Beaver show tomorrow, but we will have it later in the afternoon because tomorrow is budget day. So we will do a live viewing party of that here. And I'll say that we'll start around uh, 3:30-ish. The budget is to be read at 4, so I usually like to come on a little earlier and chat a little bit before we get into it. But we'll watch the viewing party and then have a little bit of analysis afterwards. So if we don't have a morning show in proper form, we will have a budget special. And like I said, I will try to get a morning show done for you while I can. But while I'm in Toronto, I'm going to have to um, find a very quiet place that I could record one if I was going to do one. And I'd have to do it with the camera, so there'd be no clips and stuff like that. So it might be a little trickier here this time around to try and finagle one. So stay tuned, I guess. And if I can get one for you, we'll have something tomorrow morning. It'll probably be short, and then join us back again around 3 or 3:30. Watch our socials to confirm time, and we will have the budget viewing party together. All right, getting into things. Uh, Yukon election, of course, very, very, very big deal, and as you know, it's also important because I believe there's not only an election, but there's also, I believe, a referendum or a plebiscite as well on, yes, a plebiscite, not a referendum, because it's a non-binding on electoral reform. So, looking at the Yukon news, because why not go directly to the source? According to Dana Hatherley, participation is the cornerstone of democracy, along with the rule of law and protection of minorities and accountability and free and fair elections, Yukon's chief electoral officer Max Harvey told a town hall on Zoom. Elections Yukon, an independent agency of the Yukon Legislative Assembly responsible for running elections and plebiscites, held the virtual event on October 30th to give an overview of the territorial election process and the plebiscite vote. The event appeared to have very few Zoom participants outside of Elections Yukon staffers and the news reporter. Oh, that's a shame. Harvey described the 2025 territorial elections for MLA and plebiscite vote on electoral reform as, quote, historic, given it will be the first plebiscite in the territory in a century, with more electors than ever, 2 new districts, 15 redrawn boundaries, new processes, and overlapping school board elections. Harvey explained the implications of the new districts and boundary changes. Quote, that means your candidate that you may typically see or the incumbent candidate for your district may not be the same, he said. October 31st was the final day to apply for special ballots at returning offices. Mail out special ballot applications have already ended per Elections Yukon. Eligible electors will still be able to vote between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at polling locations in all 21 ridings across the territory today, polling day. The chief electoral officer's advice to electors: know one's district and be registered to speed up the voting process, get informed on the candidates and the plebiscite on electoral reform, and exercise one's right to vote. The location of returning offices and polling locations are available on electionsyukon.ca or one's voters information card, also called a VIC, for those who are already registered, according to Harvey. The voter information card also contains the plebiscite question to help inform voters. Voters will get 2 ballots that Harvey has described as clearly distinguishable, one for MLA as usual and one for the plebiscite. The plebiscite ballot will contain the following question, quote, should the way members of the Yukon Legislative Assembly are elected be changed from the current system of first past the post to a different system of ranked vote? The ballot options to respond are yes. Voters will go to mark their ballots behind a voting screen like a privacy wall. Both ballots will go into the same box. They will be separated for the count, per Harvey. He directed Yukon voters to the Elections Yukon website to learn more about the plebiscite and the candidates in their riding, as well as where to vote and how to find your district. Harvey noted Elections Yukon has a help desk that can be reached at help@electionsyukon.ca or 867 667 8683. That's 867 667 8683, or for ease of memory, 867 667 vote. Elections Yukon is still looking for workers, particularly in Whistle Bend and Copper Belt North, Harvey said. This was from 2 days ago, however, so those might be filled. But hey, if they're still looking for workers, give a call. The last minute help would always be appreciated. When it comes to voter turnout, which is hovering at 23% following advanced polls, Harvey is hoping for a big surge on November 3rd polling day. Hopefully, we can break our record, he said. Harvey said Elections Yukon has used social media ads and videos to get the message out about the plebiscite in addition to TV, radio, and newspaper interviews. He suggested electors refer to reporting in the media and what campaigns and candidates have to say in addition to the independent agency's educational materials. Election Yukon is one element of the awareness challenge, he said. A plebiscite is non binding on the government. However, Harvey said 50% plus one is considered an expression of public will. Harvey said electors can learn about the plebiscite question, whether to keep first past the post or change the voting system to a ranked vote, while at the polling station, where informational materials will be on hand before they vote. Voters are being encouraged to learn the pros and cons of each voting system to make informed decisions. Harvey explained that voting systems determine how votes are transferred into the 21-seat legislature. He said the main differences between the two options before Yukoners are how the ballot is marked and how the ballot is counted. Under a first past the post system, the status quo in Yukon, voters get one pick and the candidate with the most votes wins. With a ranked vote, voters get to rank as many candidates on the ballot as they want in order of preference, and the most preferred candidate wins a majority. If no majority is achieved on the first round of the ballot count, then the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated and the next preferences are redistributed. This process continues until a majority of votes is reached. So there you go. Um, so yeah, uh, early election turnout, 22.5% after the votes close. Let's see what else. And of course, there's a little bit of drama. There was an NDP racer that claims that U.S. corporate money funding the Yukon Party has been funding Yukon Party ads. Also, Dana Hatherley here. The Yukon NDP was trying to draw prospective voters and donors to what the political party calls attack ads by the Yukon Party, one of the NDP's rivals in the 2025 general territorial election. I believe the Yukon Party is more ideologically conservative, if I'm not mistaken. However, the NDP has been unable to direct the news, Yukon News, to any so-called attack ads by the Yukon Party. Quote, the energy on the ground is electric, but as our campaign grows, the conservative Yukon Party is panicking. They're flush with corporate cash, including from American companies, and they're spending tons of it on attack ads, reads the NDP's fundraising email on October 24th. The news hasn't witnessed any Yukon Party advertisements with negative comments about its rivals on social media, online, on the radio, in the newspaper, or elsewhere in recent weeks. Neither has Heather Stoutenberg, who is working in communications for the NDP during this election campaign. She told the news by email that she hasn't seen an attack ad from the Yukon Party since the writs were issued on October 3rd to trigger the territorial elections. The three-way race between the NDP, Yukon Party, and Yukon Liberal Party, each of which is trying to form government, comes to a head on November 3rd, polling day, although eligible electors were able to cast their votes before then. The Yukon Party rejected the notion that the party has been putting out advertisements that attack its political opponents. Quote, the Yukon Party is above U.S.-style attack ads, and we know the majority of Yukoners do not want to see this from their leaders, reads a Yukon Party statement to the news on October 27th. The statement indicates the Yukon Party is focused on sharing its platform and plans for if the party forms government. Meanwhile, the Yukon NDP is trying to make its own money off its claims. Quote, can you help us fight back right now with a donation to get to our Get Out the Vote fund, reads the NDP's October 24th fundraising email. The fundraising email is signed off by co-campaigners, directors, let's try that again. The fundraising email is signed off by co-campaign directors François Picard and Bronte Renwick Shields. However, Stoutenberg said the email was written by a volunteer and the point about attack ads was missed during the review process before it went out. Looking a little sketchy here, maybe. Overzealous person deciding to make a claim that was not particularly borne out by the facts in an attempt to get people to panic and open up their wallets. Not necessarily the most ethical thing if there have not indeed been any attack ads. And if there haven't been any attack ads, then one has to wonder about the claim about the money as well. Also, in the final days of the election, again, according to Dana Hatherley, a longtime businessman who recently became Yukon Liberal Party leader and the incumbent premier is taking on two seasoned politicians for Yukon's premier in the 2025 general territorial elections. Yukon Liberal leader Mike Pemberton recognized he has a quote steep hill to climb compared to his rivals, Yukon NDP leader Kate White and Yukon Party leader Curry Dixon, who are both multi-time and incumbent MLAs. Dixon is a former cabinet minister. Quote, they're definitely polished, Pemberton said. Quote, I guess I'm a politician now, right? I think every day I get better, I get stronger, but I don't want to become too polished, right? Because when you become too polished, you forget about what the goal was to begin with, right? And I'm a down to earth person. On October 30th, the Liberal leader and five other fresh faces running for Liberal MLA gathered at the Theatre of the Heart of Riverdale Community Centre to highlight actions they plan to take if elected to form government. The Liberals have one incumbent MLA who is seeking re-election. None of the seven Liberal cabinet ministers are running this time around. The Yukon NDP leader also held a press conference that day at her party headquarters along several fellow candidates for MLA with her final message to voters, while the Yukon party leader offered the news a closing interview ahead of November 3rd polling day. The Liberals released their platform a week ahead of other parties. I'm going to guess here I know that the Liberal Party is currently the government. I'm going to guess here that, not having seen any polling, that the Liberals are not favored to win this one if you have seven incumbent cabinet ministers deciding not to run again. I'm going to guess that they have some information on the ground that they might not be the favored party this time here. This is just I don't know this for a fact. This is just deductive reasoning based on what I'm reading. And the leader of the liberal Yukon Liberal Party stating that he has a steep hill to climb and has no incumbency advantage. Quote, let's see here. Because we believe information is power and Yukoners deserve that power when deciding their future, Pemberton said. Some people may try to tell you this is a two-party race or that voting Liberal doesn't count. The beauty of democracy is that you decide for yourself. Vote with your head, your heart, and your gut. Vote for your values. White said Yukoners are at a fork in the road, a vote for the same old politics from the same old parties or something different. As has been the trend for the Yukon NDP lately, White quickly took a negative turn to go after the Yukon party over her party's spin around political donations, as well as for going, quote, all the way to the Supreme Court in their fight against First Nations, and for what she described as allowing major rent increases. Quote, I marched with Yukoners in the streets to protect the peel. I learned how to speak the sound of drums from outside the walls, White said. I've seen the energy, the hope, the optimism of a better future, and so has my team. We've heard from former Yukon Party voters, from Liberal voters who are voting for the Yukon NDP this time because they want a better choice. White says she is asking for Yukoners' trust. Quote, Curry is campaigning on change, but the reality is his party is still the same, she said. The Yukon Party's lineup of candidates includes 6 incumbents, including Dixon. Lake LaBerge candidate Brad Cathers has served as MLA since 2002. Copperbelt South candidate Scott Kent was first elected to the legislature in 2000. Dixon expressed optimism about his party's chances to bring about change in the territory. Quote, we're excited, he said. We've been encouraged by the positive response we've heard from Yukoners at the door, and we look forward to getting people out to vote on Monday and seeing the results. Dixon said his party has, quote, run a positive campaign focused on outlining their future plans if elected. Quote, we haven't delved into any sort of attack ads or negative campaigning that we've seen from the NDP, Dixon said. Quote, the news reported that an NDP fundraising drive claimed U.S. corporate money was funding Yukon Party attack ads that didn't exist. Dixon said he is pleased with his party's decision to take a positive approach. Pemberton also took pride in the campaign the Liberal team is running. Quote, we've run a sincere campaign focused on ideas, candidates, and values, talking directly with Yukoners, being honest and staying real. No bells and whistles, no flashy videos, or non-stop news releases, Pemberton said. At his final At his final push press conference, Pemberton again identified himself as right of center while acknowledging that some of his candidates are left of center. Quote, we have centered people and it's going to take all of us coming together and with our thoughts, our vision, fresh eyes on what's happening and to find the best solution for Yukoners, he said. Pemberton believes every Yukoner will see themselves reflected in the team of candidates the Liberals have put together. Candidates by his side also took turns to speak and respond to reporters' questions. Riverdale North candidate Mark Kelly of the Liberals offered to give Yukoners the full picture of what a Liberal government has to offer on housing and affordability, which he said are at the heart of their plan. Sonny Patch, the Liberal candidate for Riverdale South, elaborated on health and safety in communities, while Vida Palayo, who is running in Whistle Bend South, tied in the broader vision for future generations around education, childcare, and the environment. Patch told reporters about a commitment Pemberton made to Riverdale Community Center Executive Director Andrea Simpson Fowler on the heels of the news's reporting that the center may have to cut programs in the face of increasing costs. Quote, "This will help expand the programming and keep this a vibrant, welcoming space for everyone," Patch said. Quote, "We have a variety of commitments that would then work to support organizations like this one." A letter from Pemberton to Simpson Fowler was provided to the news by Liberal Communications Director Laura Seeley. The correspondence includes a pledge to increase annual funding to the center to the tune of $669,000 a year, which represents about a 77% increase in their funding per patch, to address the rising costs cited by the center if the Liberals are elected to form government. Pemberton said he hasn't made any other direct commitments to specific community groups or initiatives beyond what's noted in the platform. So there you go. So a little bit of flavor for what's going on in Yukon, and hopefully we will have some results for that for you on tomorrow's show or the day after. Also, there were um, municipal elections in the province of Quebec yesterday. We don't have time today to go into those results, but we will bring them for you. And we haven't touched back on the results from the municipal election in Alberta at the end of October, around October 20th. And we do intend to do that too on a future show. There's just a lot going on, and some things get bumped. All right, kids and cubs. Um, Another thing that happened before the weekend went out is a decision from the Supreme Court of Canada on a mandatory minimums issue. As you know, kids and cubs, this is something that conservatives are are always excited about. They tried with Stephen Harper as Prime Minister to introduce mandatory minimums for a whole bunch of things, most of which got overturned. And there's a reason for that. Mandatory minimums um, are very broad directives that need to apply in every single circumstance, regardless of the nuances and details of those circumstances. And they take discretion away from the judiciary to consider those types of nuances when delivering a sentence. So, for example, it's the difference between, um, you know, uh, outright premeditated murder and, let's say, um, murder in self defense because um, uh, experiencing, let's say, physical abuse at, intimate partner violence um, over and over and over again over an extended period of time, right? Um, those, it's still a murder, but there are different circumstances that might uh, want to make a judge decide that someone will get 20 years for one, and someone who did it in self defense after years and years and years and years of being battered uh, may not. 20 years may not be fair, right? Justice has to be fair. The sentence given has to correspond to the severity and the nature of the crime. Now, conservatives, as you know, um, often wrap themselves in, oh, someone think of the children. When they were fighting against same sex marriage, it was think of the children, right? Children deserve to live in a home with a mother and father. Yeah, but a lot of kids don't already. But that's the standard we should aim for. They shouldn't live with a father and a mother and mother. To which a lot of people turned around, well, a loving home is a loving home. And if a child has two loving parents, but both of them happen to be women or both of them happen to be men, isn't that good considering all the other alternatives? And a lot of them are a whole lot less attractive. And eventually we got to a point where, we decided that while the alleged ideal nuclear family is a father and a mother in the same home raising kids, um, that's far from universal at the moment. And nobody was able to see what increasing damage or threat there could be to children from having two loving parents in the home instead of one, except that both of them are of the same sex. So eventually, those arguments were deemed not to be particularly sound. Lately, conservatives have been making a big deal on the transgender issue. We've got to protect kids from these teachers who are allegedly encouraging them to change their gender in class and then going to the principal's office and getting it done there or something of the sort. Um, it's always, you got to protect the children. You got to protect the children, unless it's about spending public money to feed them. Then conservatives have a problem with that, unless it's allowing kids who happen to be transgender, who have parents who support them and decide between their doctors that they are going to do puberty blockers. Well, then we don't think of the kids. Then we get in the way of the parents' relationship with their medical professional there and seek to ban that option. Um, with this, think about kids. If they really cared about children, they would definitely be taking climate action, right? So, conservatives like to do this. And when they get a real issue, and in this case, there is a real issue, um, then they really go to town. And there's of this here. Um, the first thing is that one, coming back to pushing mandatory minimums again is conservatives basically confessing to Canadians that they are completely out of ideas. They've already tried this during the Harper decade, and it pretty much failed miserably for them. They became one of the most overturned governments in Canadian history. And you have to understand, kids and cubs, that when a government passes a law and either preemptively uses the notwithstanding clause as is becoming the fashion, or doesn't, and it goes to court and it gets overturned, that's literally when the Supreme Court overturns the law saying it's unconstitutional. That means the government that we elected tried to pull a fast one on us and tried to take away our rights. And the court said, no, you can't do that. No government tried to do that more to us than the Harper government. And then Pierre Poilievre in the last election ran on becoming the first prime minister in Canadian history to use the notwithstanding clause in order to abrogate fundamental and inalienable human rights. Well, let's go to Canadian lawyer. Canadian Lawyer magazine. There was a court case in face of the Supreme Court with regard to child pornography and possession. I think possession. I think it might be possession and accessing, but not distribution of child pornography. And there is a mandatory minimum 1 year prison sentence for possessing and accessing child pornography. The Supreme Court held in a 5-4 decision on Friday. This is by Jessica Mack of Canadian Lawyer magazine. The Supreme Court of Canada held in a 5-4 decision Friday that mandatory minimum 1 year prison sentences for possessing and accessing child pornography are unconstitutional, stating that the offenses cover a wide range of scenarios with varying levels of severity, including those for which 1 year's imprisonment would be a grossly disproportionate punishment. The scenario used by the High Court majority to illustrate this point involves an 18-year-old with no criminal record who receives a text message from a friend of the same age. That message includes a sext from the friend's 17-year-old girlfriend, which technically constitutes child pornography because of the girlfriend's age. In contrast, the dissenting justices argued that the mandatory minimum sentences for possessing and accessing child pornography are constitutional. The justices cited the High Court's 2020 decision in R versus Friesen, which found that courts should impose tougher punishments for sexual crimes against children, and which the higher court reaffirmed in a unanimous decision in September. The majority's decision in the Attorney General of Quebec versus Senville et al. Upheld rulings by the Quebec Court of Appeal and the Court of Quebec. Justice Mary Moreau wrote the majority opinion. Justices Andromache let's try that. Karakatsanis and Sheila Martin, Nicholas Kazerer, and Mahmoud Jamal concurred. Chief Justice Richard Wagner and Suzanne Cote jointly wrote the dissent. Justices Malcolm Rowe and Michelle Obamsawin joined in the dissent. Stephanie Pelletier-Quirion, one of the lawyers with the Pelletier-Quirion Avocat, who represented the two accused, told Canadian Lawyer that Friday's decision, quote, confirms the importance of challenging the minimum sentences in force in the criminal code when a wide range of acts can fall under the offense. She added that the decision, quote, will give more strength to arguments to come on further cases of contested mandatory minimum sentences. In a statement, Lina Thériault, one of the prosecutors with the Directeur des Poursuites Criminelles et Pénales, that's the director of criminal prosecution, criminal and penal prosecutions, or poursuite, or maybe not, yeah, I guess prosecutions. In a statement, Lina Thériault, one of the prosecutors in the case, said, quote, although minimum sentences for possessing and accessing child sexual abuse and exploitation material have been declared unconstitutional, our country's highest court makes it clear that this finding is fully compatible with the recognition that sentences must reflect the highly reprehensible and damaging nature of these offenses against children. One of the underlying criminal cases involves a man who pleaded guilty to one count of possessing child pornography and one count of accessing child pornography. In the second unrelated case, pleaded guilty to one count of possession and one count of distribution. At sentencing, both men told the Court of Quebec that the mandatory minimum sentence for possessing and accessing child pornography, 1 year's imprisonment, was unconstitutional. The court found that the mandatory minimum sentences were grossly disproportionate when compared to what it considered as more appropriate sentences, which were briefer. The Crown appealed, but the Quebec Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal. A majority of the appellate court found that the mandatory minimum sentences for both offenses violate Section 12 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees freedom from cruel and unusual treatment or punishment. The Crown appealed again to the Supreme Court of Canada. Writing for the High Court majority, Moreau outlined the two-part test for determining whether a mandatory minimum sentence complies with Section 12 of the Charter. The first part of the test involves determining a, quote, fit and proportionate sentence for the offender, as well as for other potential offenders, in a reasonably foreseeable scenario. The second part of the test involves comparing the sentence determined at the first stage with the mandatory minimum sentence for the offense. The disparity between the two cannot be grossly disproportionate. Moreau said the second comparative part of the test requires the courts to consider three factors: the scope and the reach of the offense, the effects of the penalty on the offender, and the penalty, including the balance struck by its objectives. Quote, it is essential to consider these three compartments in the same manner to ensure that a contextual and exhaustive analysis is conducted, Moreau wrote. The first two components focus on the proportionality of the sentence. The third component consists in determining whether the sentence is excessive in light of the legislative objectives of sentencing for the offense in question, having regard to the legitimate purpose of punishment and the adequacy of possible alternatives. Moreau added that each of the three factors plays a distinct and necessary role in the analysis. The justice went on to say that the appeal in Attorney General of Quebec versus Senville et al. Strictly concerns the constitutionality of mandatory minimum sentences for the possessing and accessing of child pornography. This is to be determined by examining how they could impact other potential offenders in reasonably foreseeable scenarios, which requires selecting a specific scenario for analysis. Moreau said the scenario involving the teenagers sharing a sext is acceptable for this purpose because it is foreseeable. Sexting among teenagers is both, quote, well known and documented, the justice wrote. The scenario, which involves sharing a single image, also illustrates the range of conduct caught by the crimes of accessing and possession of child pornography. Although the acts committed by the represented offender are serious and deserve to be denounced, they fall at the lowest end of the gravity scale for the crimes of accessing and possession of child pornography, Moreau wrote, adding that the appropriate sentence for the 18-year-old offender would likely be a conditional discharge with the strict probationary terms as opposed to a 1-year prison sentence. Quote, imposing a sentence of 1 year's imprisonment on the young 18-year-old representative offender when a fit sentence would be a conditional discharge with strict probationary terms would constitute a grossly disproportionate sentence, the justice said. She declared that the minimum sentences set out in sections 163.14a and 4.1a of the Criminal Code, which cover possessing and accessing of child pornography, are contrary to Section 12 of the Charter and are immediately of no force or effect. In their dissent, Wagner and Cote said they would have allowed the Crown's appeal. Referencing the High Court's decision in R versus Friesen, the justices said, through the imposition of more severe sentences, the justice system expresses society's deep and rightful indignation at offenses against children. The justices said, quote, grossly disproportionate is a high standard for a sentence that can't be met with the sentences that are merely excessive, disproportionate, or unfit. The dissent also took issue with the hypothetical scenario involving the texting teenagers in the majority. Sorry. The dissent also took issue with the hypothetical scenario involving the texting teenagers that the majority chose in its constitutionality analysis, noting that the scenario selected must be, quote, reasonable. Quote, to be reasonable, the hypothetical scenario cannot be an extreme example and must have more than a remote connection with the case. Pardon me, kids and cuts, I do need to cough for a second. Um, there we go. Sorry about that. Need to clear my throat. To be reasonable, the hypothetical scenario cannot be an extreme example and must have more than a remote connection with the case. This requires that it have a sufficient factual and legal connection with the case before the court, the justices wrote. If a hypothetical scenario is not sufficiently related to the case in question, the court cannot consider it to determine the constitutionality of the impugned provision. The justice said the scenario did not meet this criterion. This suffices to end the Section 12 analysis, the justices said. We do not have to determine what a fit and proportionate sentence would be for the representative offender in a hypothetical scenario, or to decide whether the impugned minimum sentences require the imposition of grossly disproportionate punishment. So I hear the dissenting justices are saying that there's a difference between a disproportionate sentence and a grossly disproportionate sentence. That's one of the reasons. And I'm guessing that they're saying that a mandatory minimum of 1 year could probably not be considered a grossly disproportionate sentence in any way because it's a sentence, in their view, that's probably not harsh enough to begin with. And that is something that is a fact. Sentences given for crimes against children in the criminal code are really, really, really low, ridiculously low. And this might stem from a time back when crimes like this were determined to be crimes in the first place, because unfortunately it wasn't always a crime to be doing this kind of stuff, to abuse children. But then it seems this is a personal thing of mine. I'm not sure how well it bears out, but I get the impression often um, when I look at the criminal code that sometimes the sentences for crimes made against women or vulnerable groups are lesser than sentences in other cases, and then they're even less so for children. And this may stem from a time culturally when most of the laws were written exclusively by white men, and therefore the value that they put on certain lives, for example, the lives of other white men, was much higher than the value they put on lives of other people, and therefore crimes, even violent crimes against other people that were not white men, were deemed to be lesser offenses because they had less worth and value to society. That's my personal uh, hypothesis about why it is that we keep on seeing sentences for crimes against children that are ridiculously low, and it seems that nobody has had um, the courage yet to write a bill that would up those sentences without making them mandatory minimums. So there are two ways you can go with this if you wanted to shore this up. You could try the mandatory minimum route and keep the same sentences, or you could just turn around and say, well, we're not going to have any mandatory minimums, but now, this type of crime, rather than having a sentence range of 0 to 2 years, could have a sentence range of 2 to 5 years. And you could try to make that the standard, and then people would debate whether or not that's too much or too little or all that kind of stuff, but you would still leave judicial discretion in that case, and you could achieve the goal of having harsher sentences for crimes against children. Because mandatory minimums is another way to try and go about it. If you do this, if X and Y happen, we don't need to look at anything else. You get at least a year or 3 or 5, depending on what the sentence is. Um, but again, that that's a blanket thing, and it covers everything that meets variables X and Y despite other things. So I want to make it very clear here that nobody here is saying that possessing and accessing child pornography it's not so bad, or it's not a big thing, or it shouldn't be punished severely. What is being said here is if someone should have material that could be classified as that, right? And there have been lots of debates about this along the way, right? For example, when I was a kid, um, you know, uh, there are pictures of me in the photo album when I was a kid naked. It wasn't odd at all at the time for people to take pictures of their own kids, bath time, just running around the house or whatever. Today, those would be considered child pornography. They could be interpreted by court as child pornography or as being possessing it, right? So you you and I think that that issue has been resolved legally because that was one of the first ones. So now we're talking about other issues. For example, like you said, right? 18-year-old is dating a 17-year-old, for example, and let's say the 17-year-old sends their 18-year-old boyfriend or girlfriend a sext with a picture of them that is revealing. Technically, because the picture features a 17-year-old, that is child pornography. And then let's say it gets sent by email and it's stored on your phone, and then you go and take a look at it. Well, then you've just stored and accessed child pornography. But it was a consensual sending of a picture between a boyfriend and a girlfriend that are not, 20 years of age apart, 18 and 17, but because of the law that says anything under 18, technically that photo, legally, technically, is child pornography. Do we send the 18-year-old to jail for a mandatory 1 year sentence because their girlfriend or boyfriend sent them something? Is that a fair sentence? The dissenting justices said that that type of example, they would have allowed the mandatory minimum sentence to stay because that example isn't directly linked to the two examples that were brought to the Supreme Court itself to have the mandatory minimums uh, thing challenged. Um, so I just want to make it very clear: nobody is saying, nobody at all is saying that accessing and storing child pornography is a good thing or a crime that should be punished by lower sentences. In fact, many people are saying that the sentences aren't high enough to begin with. All right. Angela Marinos, who serves as a chief general counsel for the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, one of the interveners of the case, said Friday she agreed with the majority's assessment of the hypothetical scenario that the majority used in its analysis. She said she had urged the High Court to, quote, to not choose the most sympathetic offender imaginable. In my view, making this choice implicitly loses sight of the child's interest, she said. Indeed, the hypothetical scenario of the 18-year-old who is forwarded a sext from his friend is extremely different from the factual scenario here, namely two adult men, one in his late 20s, the other in his 30s, accessing and possessing, in one case, 317 images. Wow. And in the other case, 531 images and 274 videos of little girls aged 3 to 10. And I will not read the rest of that. But yeah, not not good stuff. Marino said following that decision, Parliament will need to delineate narrow parameters of what access and possession mean, circumscribe the scope of conduct that will be captured by any mandatory minimum. Quote, we will see what actions, if any, Parliament takes in this regard. The Attorney General of Quebec did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So, I mean, I can see where the dissenting judges might have a point here. Because, yes, that is the example given is an example of probably the most sympathetic case possible. And yes, we are, uh, you know, two people. Well, in this case, it wouldn't be two people in a relationship, but I mean that could also apply to two people in a relationship. But the hypothetical scenario here is a friend of a friend who sends that friend a picture, I guess, of their whoever they are dating instead. Um, so, but I mean, in the two cases that were being challenged specifically, those two cases were nothing like that scenario, right? Like I said, in the example of sexting or whatnot, especially, uh, let's say if it is your own partner who sends you something, right? Um, there is the picture may not involve acts, might not be exploitive, would have been consensual, would have been consensually sent in that say, um, and would be shared for completely different purposes here. One is within the context of an intimate relationship, and here we're talking about people who are clearly looking for exploitive and uh, violent and degrading, I would say, material that nobody should ever, 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 ever see, make, or be exposed to, or seek to see, ever, ever. Um, so yeah, the case is. I can see where the dissenting justices in this case could make a point here that the cases are not similar enough. Um, but yeah, so that decision came down. And of course, we had conservatives all over the place saying this is a terrible decision, all this kind of stuff, and then getting involved, saying, no, we need to have mandatory minimums, and even had Danielle Smith popping in and go, we need to pass this law again and use the notwithstanding clause with it. Again, it's just like, please stop with this notwithstanding clause stuff. Please stop. Do the power of legislating. Actually write a bill that has tougher sentences, debate it, and pass it. But stop with this notwithstanding clause and mandatory minimums. Just do your job and legislate. God. Um, so they're wrapping themselves in all of this. And of course, oh my God, this terrible judiciary, look what they're doing to the children. We need to save them. That's why you need to vote up stuff. I have uh, two small clips here for you. The first one is Pierre Poliev in interview on Rosie Barton answering the first question. And then the second is someone who actually knows something about the law doing the analysis of this and explaining why mandatory minimums are typically not a good way to go when you are writing law. And the thing that astounds me about the positions that the conservatives are taking is that they see something that is inflammatory, possession of child pornography, right? We see a court saying you can't impose mandatory minimums for the possession and accessing of child pornography. Q conservatives losing their minds because Q conservatives going, oh my God, you got to save the children. And they intend to run on this. Hey, here's another case for notwithstanding clause and all the other things that they're trying to do, using this as a pretext to push other agendas. Right? But none of this is an agenda to actually protect children. Because you have to remember, again, when you're at the point of sentencing, the crime has already happened. the damage has already been done to the child. Harsher sentences after the fact perhaps have a deterrent effect, but one would have to suspect that if you're committing these types of crimes against children, um, there is probably something psychologically that makes it such that people don't really care about deterrence and will do it anyway. The other thing, however, so if you want to actually protect children, you would be putting money into programs to help prevent this. So you have to notice, we have to be very, very clear that yes, tougher sentences can have deterrent effects, but they usually have deterrent effects on people who are rational actors. Right? Like, for example, you have a really ugly breakup. Don't ask me how I know this one, with someone, and you think, gee, I am so pissed off by the way that this happened that, oh, well, look at this baseball bat here. Oh, and look, there's their car. Maybe I should remodel the car with this baseball bat. And then you grab the baseball bat and you feel it in your hands and you're getting all these happy feelings at wanting to inflict someone some type of pain. And then you realize, but if I do that, well, then, yeah, there's no doubt that that will get traced back to me. And then that will result in legal mess and charges and fines, particularly a sentence, criminal record. It was a sucky relationship, but that definitely keeps my energy tied to them as much as possible and for much longer than I need to. And maybe, even though this would feel good for 5 seconds while I am taking the headlights out and the windshield, may not be my best future life move. And then it acts as a deterrent, and you don't do it. But if you are not rational, you maybe just take that bat and start going lemonade all over that car, right? So consequences be damned. And then you've got a mess to deal with. So I am astounded by how much our legislators, particularly conservative ones, the people who we elect to write the laws, seem to know so little about the law and what it's supposed to do and what it's intended to do. So here we have Pierre Poilievre answering a question about this. And let's see how does he deal with this issue in a manner that indicates that he takes the law seriously and understands the nuances and understands why it is that mandatory minimums couldn't be used willy-nilly in every single instance of mandatory minimums. So let's see if Pierre has an appreciation of that as someone who wants to be our prime minister, someone who claims he's, and let's not forget the caveat, someone who openly ran on wanting to use the notwithstanding clause to remove our rights.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with some news that happened on Friday. The Supreme Court struck down another mandatory minimum, this one in relation to possession and access of child pornography. The Supreme Court has struck down a lot of mandatory minimum laws since 2015. But I wonder in this case, what response you think the government should have in this instance?
Well, first of all, the accused and convicted offenders are appalling, frankly. These are two men who had possession of literally hundreds of images and videos of children. One of them had 377 images of children between 3 and 6 years old. Another had hundreds of videos of children between 5 and 10. They created demand for pornographic material that was made by torturing humiliating and defiling innocent children who will never recover from it for the rest of their lives. And frankly, they were originally given 1-year sentences. That was appealed. It should have been way more than 1 year sentence. There should be a mandatory minimum of more, probably 5 or even 10 years. So this ruling is wrong-headed, and I would oppose the ruling, and I would use the notwithstanding clause to overturn it. And my future government will introduce mandatory prison sentences for possession of child pornography so that dirtbags like this go away for a very long time.
Some of the
Okay, so what we need to understand here is that Pierre is making some good points about what was possessed, what was done, what was accessed. He made some good points about crimes of this nature against children not being punished severely enough. But his solution is to not table a bill that will increase the sentencing provisions for these types of crimes, but to go back and reintroduce another mandatory minimum bill, which was just ruled unconstitutional, but with higher penalties, 5, which, if taken back to court, would then be deemed to be ruled unconstitutional again. In fact, it would be an act of outright defiance to the court. So, in order to do that, he would then put the notwithstanding clause on that. In order to override the court. Now, again, while a lot of us, most of us, I would assume, I would like to say all of us, but maybe that's not the case, but while all of us, let's say, would prefer to have harsher sentence against crimes of this nature, for crimes of this nature committed against children. There's what you want to do, and then there's the way you go about accomplishing it. As we say often on the show, right? It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Introduce a bill that has harsher sentencing provisions for these types of crimes. Make the case that these types of crimes are particularly odious. Where we are in 2025 is now not where we were in 1970 or 1980 or 1990. We recognize that these crimes are particularly odious and deserve harsher sentences. So we are going to change the structure from 0 to 1 year, mandatory 1 year, to a sentence range of 3 to 5, but still allow the judges to have the discretion. But that's not what he wants to do. He wants to go back and do the exact same thing that was just deemed unconstitutional, and then slap the notwithstanding clause on top of it. This is a man that's too lazy to do the work of actually legislating. Legislatures legislate, write laws, pass laws. Don't just turn around and say, I don't like this mandatory minimum on this, notwithstanding clause, so you can remove it away. That's lazy. And it goes against everything that we stand for as a society and as a country of rule of laws and rule with rights. Conservatives have this habit of taking the absolute worst cases, the most outrageous cases, the most gross cases, and trying to establish minimum law for everyone based on those. When usually the way that we do the law is that the most extreme case is usually very rarely reached. Right? We have there have been murders since time began. But not every murderer is a Paul Bernardo or a Clifford Olson. So if you set the law, the minimum law that serves everybody for the Paul Bernardo and Clifford Olson cases, there's going to be a lot of people caught in the justice system in sentences and whatnot that are highly disproportionate for that which they have done. You need provisions for those worst case scenarios. For example, right, every time Paul Bernardo comes up for parole, the Conservatives lose their mind and raise a lot of money on that, even though all of us know that there's no chance in hell that Paul Bernardo is going to get parole. But they raise money on the possibility that he could, because our justice system is designed in such a way that we first assume that people can be rehabilitated to re-enter society. He wants to write the law as if everyone is irredeemable. That turns our justice system on its head. But they always use the most salacious, emotionally charged cases to make their point. Because using this type of case to do that then has them turn around and says, well, what, you don't want to protect your children? Oh, so you're for child pornography now. Oh, so you want to be soft on, right, possessing child porn. It's like, no, nobody wants that except for people who possess child porn, probably. But that's not what we're doing, right? We want a legal system that delivers justice, tempered with mercy, that does have a deterrent effect, does have a punitive effect, but also has a possibility to not reading. See, I'm thinking of a word in French, and I can't get the similar concept in English coming. That people not redeem, reestablish, but that people can learn and change for the better, right? And that's why we talk about things in the prison system, like having, work programs and the ability to get further your education and all that type of stuff, and training programs, so that when they leave that environment after their punishment, rehabilitation, there's the word, that they can be rehabilitated and productive members of society henceforth, after having served their time and paid their debt to society. Right? You want to rehabilitate. You don't want to just put somebody away for 3 years. You did a bad thing, there goes to there, and then come back out 3 years later without having acquired any other skills for when you go back into society to reintegrate. Right? We focus on rehabilitation and reintegration as well as deterrence and punishment. You have to have all three aspects. Pierre does not believe in the rehabilitation and the reintegration part. We've heard Pierre talk many times about people coming out in a box. Right? So we have to be careful when we're talking about these very emotionally charged cases, because these are exceptions, not necessarily the rule. Right? Now, in the case of possession of child porn, I mean, that's probably more the rule than the exception, let's be honest. But mandatory minimums, you have to be very careful with how they apply. So let's keep on going. Let's go back what Pierre has to say with regard to, my bad, I closed the wrong window there. So come on, computer. Work with me. There we go. Thank you so much. All right, so let's get back to this portion here.
Exchange images and then have a mandatory minimum imposed on them. I don't know what you make of that reasoning.
I think the Supreme Court needs to get away from these imaginary scenarios. The scenario before them was two men in possession over a long period of time of hundreds of images and videos that were made by torturing innocent children, And with those facts in front of them, their conclusion actually should have been that the sentence should have been much more than the 1 year and months that the two dirtbag offenders received. They should go away for a very long time. Frankly, if I had my way as a father, I would lock them up and throw away the key.
Okay, so there we go. Pierre again. Lock them up, throw away the key. They can't be rehabilitated. They come out in a box. And now he's starting to conflate things, right? He's saying that the court should have ruled that their sentences should have been higher. That's not what the case was about. This wasn't a case where the Crown was going back to the court, Supreme Court, to appeal the sentence that was given because it wasn't harsh enough, asking for a harsher sentence. The court did not have an opportunity to rule in that way because that's not what was being discussed. What was being discussed at this court case was not whether or not they were guilty, not whether or not they deserved harsher sentences or lighter sentences, but whether or not the 1 year mandatory minimum was appropriate to be used in this case. Now, let's say that this 1 year mandatory minimum for accessing and possessing child pornography law had been passed under the Conservatives during the Harper time. Let's assume that that had happened. What's going on here is that these people who clearly oppose the 1 year mandatory minimum, so clearly must have gotten at least a year, got to appeal their sentences by virtue of the fact that the people who passed that law determined that there should be a mandatory minimum rather than just raising the sentencing provisions. So if this law got struck down, now that doesn't mean the two people there have their sentences removed. They're still guilty. They still get sentenced, whatever's there. It's just that the concept of a mandatory minimum for this is unconstitutional and cannot be applied. That's the fault of the party that wrote that law that was too lazy of doing the work to write a proper law. And all the time, the party that passed that law led us to believe that children would be more protected as a result of that law was a lie, because they passed a law that they should have known at the time that they were passing it and writing it would have been unconstitutional. And the reason they should have known that is because they have a whole group of lawyers. Again, and access to the best research, access to the best legal minds, that they can debate all of that and go through it. And they still decided, despite the fact, probably being told at that time, that this was going to happen, to do it anyway. Whenever a government passes a mandatory minimum law that is inherently constitutional and tells you that you are safer as a result, they are lying, because they didn't do anything to pass you safe. An unconstitutional law keeps nobody safer. You get the PR hit, you get the fundraising hit, you get to pat yourself on the back and, oh my God, look at me, how I'm a great defender of children, law and order. But you didn't actually do anything to protect anybody because you passed a law that's invalid. Conservatives are famous for this. They are legislators who do not want to do the hard work of actually legislating, understanding the law, how it works, why it works that way, and writing their bills to get the effect that they want in a manner that corresponds with the system that we have. Everything is ham-fisted. Everything is performative, like Pierre's doing here. He's now actually lying about the case in order to make his point. But nobody's going to pay attention to that because we're talking about possession and accessing of child porn, which is highly emotional. This is what the conservatives do all the time. All right, let's get back to it.
One budget, because that is, of course.
Okay, so that was the extent of it on that part. So there you go, kids and cubs. Pierre Poilievre, basically going back to the same things he's always been saying, mandatory minimums for everyone, and then throw the notwithstanding clause on it to make sure that everybody goes in jail. And then, God, if it were me, well, I'd just throw them all in jail and, well, they'd come out in a box. This is not someone who's serious. This is not a government in waiting. This is, again, a party that is stuck in the third stage of grief. Anger and bargaining. Anger and bargaining. The law should be what I think the law should be, not what it actually is. I don't accept it. I don't accept it. Maybe we could do it with the notwithstanding clause. Maybe we could do it with this. Maybe we could do it with that. Rah, rah, rah. Anger, 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 bargaining, 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 rather than just accepting. You did a shit job when you passed the law in the first place. You did a shit job when you passed the law in the first place. Now, kids and cubs, I have the other side of this for you. The side that makes the case that people who possess child pornography, who possess and access child porn, should have more lenient sentences. But the part that states why the law is the way the law is, and how it is, why it's important that you pass laws if you want to protect people, if you actually do want to protect people, right? If you actually do want to protect people, you would fund the programs that reduce the incidences of crime. But then, if you wanted to protect people on the other side with harsher sentences that act as deterrents, well, then you would pass those laws, and you would write those laws in a manner that are consistent with our Constitution to make sure that those laws could survive. And whenever the conservatives write this type of law that can't survive, they always tell us that they've consulted with everybody and they've been assured that their law is absolutely constitutional. And then we always find out that it's not. So they lie to us as well. But if you really want to protect people, you fund the programs that are preventative. And then on the deterrent side, if you need to do that, you actually write laws that are constitutional to start with. And you seek to write laws from the outset that are going to be constitutional. When you turn around and you say, I'm going to impose a mandatory minimum or notwithstanding clause on this, you are actively confessing to the entire nation that you do not want to do the work. That you want a big moment, but you don't actually care about keeping people safe. Because if you did, you would do it the right way the first time. So let's take a look at this. This is Kyla Lee, a TikTok that she did. This person actually is a lawyer. So let's see what she has to say. Because there's what Pierre Poilievre, politicians, say about the law. And then there are what actual people in the law say about the law. And those things are very different. All right, kids and cubs.
Criminal law news in Canada today. The Supreme Court of Canada has struck down the mandatory minimum sentence in the criminal code for CP offenses, specifically possessing it and accessing it. And the reason for this, you might think, hey, wait a minute, these are terrible offenses. And that's what the Supreme Court of Canada says. But what the Supreme Court of Canada reasoned was that because the offense itself of possessing it or accessing it captures a broad range of conduct, the mandatory minimum sentence doesn't make sense in the circumstances of some very easily, reasonably foreseeable circumstances, one of which is that an 18-year-old receives a spicy message from their 17-year-old girlfriend, saves it on their phone, and accesses it. The 18-year-old and the 17-year-old are in a consensual relationship under Canadian law. The 18-year-old and the 17-year-old have both voluntarily chosen to do this thing, but it is technically illegal. And the court says, yes, this is conduct that does need to be denounced, because it is still CP nevertheless. But does that person deserve the same mandatory minimum sentence as somebody who's going online and downloading, very exploitative material? Absolutely not. So that's why the sentence was struck down. But this decision is also a bigger message, especially in this time where there's this huge hue and cry in our justice system for stronger penalties, less bail, greater mandatory minimums, where the government has tabled legislation that would make sentencing tougher in some circumstances. This is a message from the Supreme Court of Canada that you can't create tough mandatory sentences unless you really consider that absolutely nobody who sentences could be captured under that sentencing regime, because otherwise that makes the sentence constitutionally vulnerable. And the court even talks about constitutional vulnerability when it comes to mandatory minimum sentences, and talks about how the constitutional vulnerability is directly tied to the way in which a mandatory minimum sentence captures a broad range of conduct. Think about for impaired driving offenses, for example. If you're sleeping in your vehicle, which is, as we've discussed, the criminal offense of impaired operation of a motor vehicle, because that's care and control, if you're sleeping in the vehicle, you get the same mandatory minimum of sentence as somebody who crashes their car into multiple parked cars and, deliberately got behind the wheel knowing that they were impaired. That's the same mandatory minimum, and yet one variation of the conduct most people are not that particularly bothered by, whereas the other one everybody's bothered by. This is why these mandatory minimum sentences are a bad idea. The government has repeatedly been told by the Supreme Court of Canada that if you're going to craft mandatory minimum sentences, you'd better be very sure that they're not going to capture anybody, a hypothetical offender or a reasonable possibility of the application of the law that is going to make the sentence appear grossly disproportionate. And so that's why the CP mandatory minimum was struck down by the Supreme Court of Canada today.
There you go, kits and cubs. Very, very clearly explained. So basically, what this law is telling us is that the Conservative Party of Canada, and particularly Pierre Poilievre, who considers him a prime minister in waiting, leading a party in waiting, as legislators, as persons who want control over all of our lives, are not willing, when they legislate for crime, and try to do it in a stunting way so that they can pat themselves on their back for being tough on crime and tough on law and law and order party, will not do the work, the actual very important legal work, constitutionally important work of ensuring that the laws that they campaign on to appear tough on crime are laws that actually capture or actually take into account the full range of human conduct that can be impacted by the law. They only look at the absolute worst case of scenarios, the worst of the worst, the most spectacular, the most eye-watering, and they make their laws based on that. And a government that makes laws based on that is going to be overturned consistently over and over and over again. And as I mentioned, laws that get overturned protect nobody. So if conservatives want to keep on passing laws that ultimately protect nobody, this whole law and order thing is just a scam. If you say you want to protect children by having tougher child pornography laws, but you keep on passing laws in a manner that are unconstitutional will get overturned, do you really want to protect children from child pornography laws? One has to start wondering. Sorry, not protect children from child pornography laws, but protect children from child pornography. Do you? If, as the Supreme Court keeps on telling you, that you need to consult with Indigenous people in order to build a pipeline to Tidewater, and you refuse to do that, do you really want to build a pipeline to Tidewater? Because it seems to me if you really did, you would just get on with it and start consulting. The conservative position against the courts, the activist judges, is always that we want to do something and we wanted to do it the lazy way. We don't want to consult. We don't want to consider the full range of human activity. We don't want to do that hard work. We don't want to have to go into the weeds and explain to our voters why it is someone sleeping in their car is not the same thing as someone smashing into a whole bunch of cars. Because they both happen to be impaired at the time where they're doing it. We don't want to do that work. Legislators who do not want to do the full work of legislating do nothing to keep us safe, and is definitely not a government in waiting. So you're going to see a lot about this, and you probably have seen a lot about this. Oh my God, it's so terrible. What the hell? The world's going to hell in a handbasket. I can't believe these liberals people and all these activist judges are doing that. All these child porn, nobody's supporting. This is really an intricate matter of law. And it just boggles my mind that a party that is trying to present itself to the nation as a government in waiting is also telling us that they actually don't care about not breaking the law in the process of writing new law. And then claim to be a law and order party. The mind fuck here is just absolutely incredible. But hey, that's what conservatives do. Lie, cheat, dissimulate, conflate. Everything but actually doing the work. I swear, if conservatives spent as much time trying to write sound laws and develop sound policy and engage in sound accounting and budget processes as they spend time gaslighting and twisting and torquing and stabbing people in the back and jumping to conclusions and all of that stuff, they would actually be a serious party. This is not a government in waiting by any shape or form, definition, by anything that we can detect in observable reality. This is not a government in waiting. Which makes one wonder why it is they want to be the government so much, allegedly. We've been talking about the budget a lot. And how a lot of pundits, if you've been watching the political shows this weekend, saying, well, you know what, if you had asked me last week, I would have said there was no chance that we were going to an election as a result of this budget. But now I'm wondering, I don't know. All the opposition parties really seem to be digging their heels on their pre-reading the budget positions. And it just seems once again, we have anger and bargaining from the conservatives. We should have won the last election. But you didn't, Blanche. You didn't. We should have won the last election. We should have won the last election. Liberals, stop trying to pass your agenda. Pass ours instead, because we should have won the last election. You have the conservatives, well, all the opposition parties basically going around and saying, well, if the liberals want their budgets to pass, well, it's then up to them to present a budget that we can vote for. Yes, to a certain extent, but also if you want the budget to pass while stunting and claiming that you don't because it's so unacceptable, but really you do because you don't want to go into an election or you're not ready for one, then it is up to you to find a way to ensure that budget passes. So you have the liberals and the conservatives each accusing each other of trying to provoke an election. And I think what's going on here is that the conservatives want to oppose this budget, but don't want an election. Because if we had another election now, given Pierre's inherent unpopularity, and being 20 points behind the prime minister, the conservatives are probably not confident that they would win it. And if they didn't win it, well, Pierre would have had 2 shots at the can, and he would definitely be dumped from the party. And I don't think Pierre wants to be dumped by his party before his leadership review even takes place. So I don't think the Conservatives want to go into an election at the moment. But they also can't be seen by their base as having done anything to help this budget to pass, which is why, as we reported on Friday, they were talking with the NDP and asking the NDP to take the hit for them and calling off their dogs and saying, no, don't attack the NDP, don't attack the NDP. You should have stopped attacking the NDP a long time ago if you wanted their help now. You probably should have never started attacking them in the first place. But it's like stopping to attack the NDP like 3 days before a budget vote is not going to earn you any loyalty or affection on the part of the NDP Conservatives. I just have to tell you that. So we are at a situation, I think, where Prime Minister Mark Carney doesn't want to go into an election because he keeps on saying that he wants to build stuff at a rate, at speeds not seen before in a long time. Well, you can't do that if you need to interrupt that for 2 or 3 months to have another election, right? And then do all the swearing in and all that type of stuff and another speech from the throne and all that stuff. You just want to get on with it. Time is of the essence. But I also think that Mark Carney is not afraid of one. So Mark Carney and the Liberals don't see any particular need to make big concessions to any of the three opposition parties at all. You're not going to hold our agenda hostage. If you guys want to go into an election, then you guys will provoke it by not voting for this budget. We are happy to run on this budget as an electoral platform. But if you really don't want to go into an election, then you're going to have to make that happen because you're going to get very little from us as candy or incentive to not do it. You're not going to extract much concessions from us. We won. We're governing. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, we're not going to get a vote on the budget tomorrow because the text of a budget is not a bill, right? It's not like the speech from the throne where the text of the speech of the throne gets voted on. With budgets, you have estimates and ways and means measures and all that type of stuff. And those are the things that get voted on. And those are where the confidence votes will be held. But there's no vote on the actual text of the budget. The text of the budget is just read. And then the legislation with the financial legislation then gets drafted and gets read and debated in committee and whatnot, and then gets passed. So those will be the confidence votes. So yeah, it will, and there's usually more than one, I would suppose, because well, maybe not. Maybe, yeah. Well, let's just say, I'll just say the budget estimates and forget the ways and means stuff because I'm a little shaky on that type of stuff at the moment. I'd have to read more about that to be sure. So, yeah, there is some, there is doubt, but the word on the tweet still seems to be that certain parties will find a way. Either there will be a couple of conservatives that will develop a cough on the day, or perhaps with the NDP, given that there is a little bit of divide in the party, mainly between female members of the party who would identify as BIPOC and the other members of the party, that some might be willing to go their own way on this. Also, those three women did not support Don Davies as interim leader of the party. Just, you need to remember that as well. So, and didn't feel like the vote really took into account their perspective. Let's put it that way on that. They weren't happy with the way the election of the interim leader had gone down. So there might still be some feelings as a result of that. So there's lots of opportunities left for that budget to pass in many other ways. But right now it seems that conservatives are really desperate to look like they're not doing anything. So it's like the conservatives really don't want to have a couple of their MPs not be present or abstain on the day, because it will be hard as much as Pierre can turn around and say, "Well, we voted against it." Yeah, you voted against it the way Republicans in the senators in the states vote against stuff. You'll notice uh, when often when Lisa Murkowski votes for something, Susan Collins votes against it, or when Lisa Murkowski says she's going to vote against it, well, Susan Collins finds a way to vote for it, thus making sure that it passes by one or ends up exactly tied. So each of those senators at their own turn take a time to say, "Oh well, I know I opposed," but they can't seem to manage to oppose at the same time to make sure the bill actually fails, though, right? So I'm not sure that Pierre Poilievre would be able to get away with that because there's a lot of people paying a lot of very close attention to him, particularly on his side of the political spectrum, especially the ones that are really, really hardcore, the 45% of the conservative base that thinks that Trump is doing a great job. Yeah, they're watching Pierre very, very, very closely. They will know. So Pierre is desperately trying to find a way to get the NDP to take the hit for them. So we might end up in an election by accident. Everybody playing a game of chicken and nobody wanting to blink first. And parties, in the case of the Conservatives, fearing their base more than they fear anything else. And perhaps accidentally tripping us into an election because they really, 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 really thought that the NDP or the Bloc would give it to them somehow. The chances, I have to agree with the pundits, the chances of an accidental election, if everybody assumes that somebody is bluffing and they'll bend at the last minute, but nobody actually does, we can end up in an accidental one. But if that's the case, I really don't think that Mark Carney would fear it. Now, a couple of other things that have happened very, and we'll go into this briefly because we're talking about anger and bargaining and the Conservatives not seeming to be able to accept the fact that they lost the last previous election. They're still trying to govern from the opposition benches with no partners because nobody likes them because they can't play nice with anyone. But in other news related to that type of stuff, and I'm just going to go check out my notes here. Yes. Okay. Well, those are about the main things there. But there's the trade stuff with Donald Trump. As you know, Doug Ford put out that ad. Donald Trump cut off trade talks and then said he was going to slap another 10%. We still don't know when that's happening. There was an APEC meeting. There was a dinner there. Apparently, Mark Carney and Donald Trump exchanged some words. Then we started hearing Donald Trump going around says, "Well, Mark Carney apologized, but the tariffs stay on." I had a hard time believing Donald Trump at first because Donald Trump says a lot of things, but it does seem that Prime Minister Mark Carney did indeed state, I believe, on the 1st of November, that he had indeed seen the ad as Doug Ford volunteered by running his mouth. I never said that. And that he did indeed, it seems that the Prime Minister also stated to Doug Ford at the time that he did not approve of the ad and maybe even gave him advice to not circulate it. And Doug Ford did it anyway. And the Prime Minister still, when initially asked about whether or not he was upset with Doug Ford, didn't go out and say that, just basically said, we didn't take ads for reasons that were pretty much obvious to us, but I guess Doug Ford decided to go another way. 4 days ago, Pierre Poilievre stated explicitly that Carney approved Ontario's anti-tariff ad. Not sure how exactly Pierre Poilievre could have stated that as a fact, given that he wasn't in the room. And at the time that he said that, none of that was in the public domain. So, yeah. But Pierre stated what he wished to be true as a fact. Carney approved Ontario's ad. And then, according to Mackenzie Gray, who is a national reporter with Global News covering Parliament Hill, published on November 1st, 2:08 a.m. Mark Carney says he apologized to Trump over the Ontario anti-tariff ad, saying, quote, "It's not something he would have done." He added, when he watched the ad with Doug Ford, he told the premier he didn't want Ontario to go forward with it, but Ontario did so anyways. I have not heard anything from Doug Ford that did not happen in the way that Mark Carney has stated. You'd think Doug Ford, when he was opening his mouth and yammering that the Prime Minister had seen the ad, would have proactively volunteered the portion about the Prime Minister given him his recommendation not to do it, and Doug Ford having defied him. But I guess Doug Ford didn't find that bit of information important to volunteer proactively while he was trying to collect the PR points for having run the ad. So this really does look like a case like Doug Ford cost us. Now, again, I will admit that I liked the ad, and it certainly felt good, and to see Donald Trump lose his mind felt good. I'm not unhappy that Donald Trump lost his mind. I'm not unhappy that there are Republicans in the United States that say, oh my God, yeah, look how far we have strayed from Reagan, actually. I'm not unhappy about that, but that's the petty me. The strategic me is sitting there going, yeah, that was probably a dumb move at this particular time. Yes, the ad was effective, but it was probably a dumb move that cost us. And that's why you want to have a statesman and a diplomat as your prime minister rather than a boxer or a street fighter. You want somebody that can keep his emotions and anger and pettiness and need to retaliate in check in order to achieve the primary objective. Doug Ford is not capable of that. And it seems that his inability to exercise mastery and control over himself has cost us. And it seems that the Prime Minister is now not afraid to indicate that. Whereas prior, he just didn't want to talk. He wanted to talk as little about it as possible. Because he knew if he had to go into it, he might have to say something that would embarrass a premier. And Mark Carney doesn't like to play games and wasn't set to score a point off Doug Ford's mistake. But now we know, do we? And we also know that when Pierre Poilievre stated for a fact that Mark Carney approved the ad, that Pierre Poilievre once again lied. He just straight up lied. Made it up. But now we know. We have confirmation. Because it would have definitely been in the interest of the Prime Minister to say nothing whatsoever about whether or not he approved the ad and anything at all about what advice he gave Doug Ford when he saw the ad. It would have been advantageous for everyone if that little bit of dirty laundry did not get aired in public, but Doug Ford had to run his mouth. And then Pierre jumped all over that because Doug Ford opened his mouth, and Pierre Poilievre used that as an opportunity to say, yeah, well, the Prime Minister definitely approved the ad. So now we've got conservatives going, oh my God, I can't believe that the Prime Minister apologized to Donald. Well, what the fuck are you going to do at this point? Nobody wants to apologize to him. But also, an apology costs nothing. Gee, I'm sorry my premier did that, man. Just, I told him not to, but he just went ahead. Sorry. Let's just get back on with it. Nobody likes to see it. And Trump doesn't actually really deserve one. But if all it's going to take is for the prime minister to turn around and say, yeah, my guy did a bad, that will thaw things, why wouldn't we? So we don't have to mean it. We just have to say it. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, fine. Let's get on. Right? But now the Conservatives are going to run to town on this. Mark Carney apologized. They're going to try to make him look weak on that. Sometimes in a negotiation, you have to know when to pull back in order to be able to come back, regroup, and charge again. And let us remind you again that Pierre Poilievre seems to want us to believe that he would have had a deal by now, and that it would have been tariff-free. And again, the only tariff-free deal that was ever on offer was to become the 51st state. So I don't know if this is Pierre actually confessing to us that we would already be the 51st state if he were prime minister today. We're on the way to 51st statehood. If he would have just sold us out for a quick deal. Because there is no tariff-free deal on the table. There's even a great interview with the former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien this weekend on CBC's The House, reminded us that we've never had a trade deal, and also told us to not get all that excited because the United States has always done what it wanted to do, despite the trade deal that was written down on paper, using softwood lumber. As an example, he says we kept on going to court and we kept on winning, and then the U.S. government was like, so what? And then would just do what they did anyway. It's just that this time they are much more in your face and aggressive about it and punitive about it than they were back then. But according to Jacques Chrétien, this is just an extension of behavior that has always existed from the United States. Always. It just was never done with the spiking the football and the rage and the anger and the venom and whatnot. That's there. But they're essentially the same moves. So sometimes when you speak to an elder who's a little more removed, and it's like, oh, yeah, I've seen this before. This was constant when I was there too. This is nothing new. It's on steroids, but it's nothing new. So there you go. So yeah, Poilievre lied. Doug Ford defied the federal government on that one. He freelanced, did what he was going to do anyway, and it has had consequences. And as a result, the prime minister did do the apology that was needed for form. And now, hopefully, things can get back on track eventually. But you still have Donald Trump still saying, well, the apology, it was very nice, but I'm still not going to talk to him for now. Okay, fine. Fine. I said, we're trying to buy time. If you want to give us time by not talking to us, we're good with that. It's not a punishment for us. But yeah. God, Pierre. And I guess the last thing that I have for you that would give an indication of how things might not be going well for Pierre. And this was a very interesting decision. As you know, the whole thing that is going on right now with that ad has to do with the words of Ronald Reagan, right? We took a speech from Ronald Reagan where he was talking about tariffs and generally saying that they are not good, But there can be some very exceptional circumstances that for a very short time, a tariff can be useful, can serve purpose, but as a general rule, not all that great. But all of this has to do by taking words of Ronald Reagan. That's what it's all about. Well, Pierre is decided to tell a joke at an event. And it wasn't his own joke, it was a joke that he lifted from someplace else, as Pierre often does. And turns out that the joke he lifted was a joke from none other than Ronald Reagan. There's a little bit of irony there. Now, the thing about this joke, well, it's a sex joke. It's a sex joke. And it's not necessarily a bad joke. But when you're the guy most famous during the last election campaign for going up to female reporters and asking them to regale you with tales of how wondrously big their crowd size is, you probably don't want to then move to just straight up telling sex jokes. Just saying. If you had a little judgment and discernment, and in the context where everybody is talking about using the words of a former president, going back to take the words of that same former president to do this, probably some territory you would want to avoid. As a communication strategist, I would have advised Pierre to avoid this territory with a very, very large distance. But Pierre is a man who goes his own way. MGTOW. So Pierre thought that this joke was this very appropriate, I guess. Now, this here, this clip here is going to show you the joke. There's a clip of just Pierre telling the joke, but there's another clip with someone who found that the joke was from Reagan originally and spliced in the Reagan parts in there. So I'm going to show you that one. Actually, you know what? Let's do it the other way, kids and cubs. Let's show you both. I do have a little bit of time. So let's do that one. Let's show you the joke that as Pierre presented on the day. Now, where did it go? That's very weird. Okay, I'll look for it again. So yeah, let's show the joke as Pierre stated it in its original form before any of us knew that it came from somewhere else, and then we'll show you the one that's spliced in, telling his version.
It reminds me of a
that joke. Nope, sorry. This one is also interesting. My God, I'm having trouble today. Oh, man. All right. This might be the one here.
And as she was...
Okay. So here's Pierre telling his joke with great comedic style. All right. Gee.
It reminds me of the lady who got married for her 4th time. And as she was leaving the wedding hall and driving with her new husband to the hotel, she said, "I'm feeling a little bit nervous." He said, "Why?" She said, "This is my first time being with a man." And he said, well, how is that possible? You've been married 3 times already. And she said, well, each of my prior husbands had a condition. My first husband had a heart condition. And so when we got back to the hotel room, he got so excited that sadly he died of a heart attack. My second husband had an eye condition. And so he didn't see a tree as he was driving back to the hotel, and he hit it and didn't survive the crash. And the man said, what about your third husband? What was his condition? She said, well, he was a liberal. And so every night he would just sit at the end of the bed and promise how good it would one day be.
Okay. Not a bad joke. But you will notice here at Kits and Cubs, who's behind him? Youth. This was a joke he decided to tell at a big youth event that he had. You see, the Prime Minister delivered that speech a couple of days ago in front of a younger audience. And then Pierre said, oh my God, I can't believe he told that younger audience that they're going to have to sacrifice. Young people have sacrificed enough. So he was telling all of us that we would have to sacrifice somewhat. Here, but the Conservative seems to think that it was only applying to young people here. And then Pierre decided to have his own youth thing. Yes, and thought that a way that he could be hip and cool is to tell a sex joke. Now, people there laughed. It's not a bad joke. I'm not sure as a 21, 22-year-old, 18-year-old, 25-year-old, I would want to go to a rally and hear politicians tell sex jokes, even if the purpose of the sex joke is to bash a liberal. I would be cringingly uncomfortable. Now, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with a good sex joke. I love them. But context. Leader in waiting. At a youth event. Okay. It's a choice. It's a choice. Not one I would have made. But it's a choice. So, now, reminds him, right? The situation reminded him of something. Well, wasn't reminded him because he literally lifted the entire joke from someone else. He could have said, it reminds me of a joke I heard Ronald Reagan say. But he didn't frame it that way. So let's take a look now at the Ronald Reagan Pierre sort of mashup. All right, here we go.
Lady who got married for her 4th time.
It reminds me of a politician who ripped off a joke from another politician.
She was looking for a wedding gown for her 4th wedding.
When we got back to the hotel room, he got so excited that sadly he died of a heart attack.
Actually, all the excitement of the wedding was simply too much for him, and he died as we checked into the hotel on our wedding night.
And the man said, what about your third husband?
What about your third husband? Asked the store clerk.
She said, well, he was a liberal.
Well, the woman replied, he was a Democrat.
He would just sit at the end of the bed and promise how good it would one day be.
He just sat on the edge of the bed and told me how good it was going to be.
Here's what I think. I think that it's a funny joke. I think it's a decent joke. I don't think it's Pierre's joke, but I do think it's fucking funny that it's Reagan's joke, given the whole Doug Ford commercial thing. Tell me if you disagree.
So there you go, Kits and Cubs. Lifting jokes off Ronald Reagan. A sex joke. And then telling it at an event that was targeted to youth. Again, at Yuck Yucks, that could have landed well. Maybe if it wasn't an event billed for youth, maybe. Um, but yeah, I just thought it was an odd choice for Pierre here. But hey, again, I will leave it up to you to make that decision. I find the choice of telling a sex joke at that event interesting, but the fact that he lifted it from Reagan as well, um, different. But you get see Saucy go. See, Reagan had the riz. It's why he was able to screw everything up. ah, yeah, I guess so. I guess so. All right. PNC bio. I am in disbelief that Pierre would take someone else's work. Shocked, appalled, clutch pearls. I did note sarcasm. I did note that that was written in slight sarc font. All right, kids and cubs. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Turns out it wasn't a shorter show in the end. There you go. Full show. We hope that you enjoyed this because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us. We really appreciate it when you do. Kids and cubs, if you would like to make sure that you do not miss anything when we have it fresh off the podcast bandwidth, in case you're not able to watch the live show, thanks to the Ray Girl, you don't have to miss anything. You just scan this QR code, which will bring you to our podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver with a hyphen between each one of those words. And when we have something fresh off the podcast bandwidth, it will come straight to your feed. Mr. Grizzly mentioned on Friday that he knows that he's a little bit behind and will be working to try to get those episodes out because we are almost a month behind now. But please do not lose faith. We will get that to you. Just schedules, life, things are very, very, very busy at the moment, but we will do our best. All right, kits and cubs, if you would like to help us, kits and cubs, please grab your e-surfboards and surf on down to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, where kids Cassie and Elaine will urge and beckon you to play with our buttons, like, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching, remember, if you smash now, you don't have to remember to do it before the show ends. So come and smash with our buttons. It helps us with the algorithm, and it makes us very happy when we see our numbers go up. We're at 27,000 now, kids and cubs. It happened soon after the last show. Woohoo! All right, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Also, kids and cubs, if you would like to help us in other ways, we do incur some costs to bring the show to you. And the QR code that just appeared in the corner would bring you to the Emergency Hydration Fund here at the Beaver Lodge, otherwise known as our coffee page. That's coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word. And there you can make a slight contribution and enthusiastic expression of encouragement, as we like to call it, because you like our content and you would like to help us produce more. So thank you so very much for everything you're able to contribute. It means the world to us. And for everyone who buys memberships and helps us with Super Chat and the YouTube, we are very, very grateful for all of your support. It really does mean the world to us. Now, kids and cubs, if you're doing the Buy Canadian thing, then you can just send a bank transfer to truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. And that way we get 100% of your donation, and none of it goes to the USCE Tech Bros. So we can actually do more with your donation if you send it that way. Thank you so very much. Now, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is also the address at which you can write us to let you know what you think about the show and make guest suggestions for interviews or anything else of the kind, because sometimes you're not able to contribute financially, but you can still contribute to the show. And we like to hear from you. So please write to us. And if you want to reach us via our socials, at True Eager, at the Blue Sky Beaver Lodge on the shitter, True North Eager Beaver on the Facebook page, and right here on the YouTube channel, down here in the comment section, you can leave us a little something. We really appreciate it when you take the time to leave a message. We're not able to answer everyone, but we do read everything, and everything goes back into the show. And for all of you who may have missed it, on Friday I was on the O Show with Laura Babcock. So if you would like to take a look for that, it was still on Halloween. So J.D. Vaughn's Cherica and Cushy had another little moment there on that show. So, and I was happy to say that the guy liner held up all morning long. No smears, no smudges. Maybe it's Maybelline. It's all about the glamour, darlings. It's all about the glamour. I love it. Because democracy is something that you do. If you're in Yukon territory, please do go vote today. Don't let friends do democracy alone, kids and cubs. And remember, we have a petition, House Petition E6679, to have more honesty in politics. And we also have House Petition 6821, that this is the one I'm going to feature today, brought to our attention by Kit Linda, to basically make it such, to ask parliamentarians to pass laws that would make it such that Canadian media companies would be controlled by Canadian interests, something we advocate for a lot on the show. We're at just under 5,000 signatures, and yours could definitely be helpful there, kids and cubs. So I will include it here in the chat. Please go there and add your beautiful calligraphy to that signature, as I have. All right, kids and cubs, what else do we have? Words of wisdom, I guess. I don't really have it. You know what? I'm just gonna say, on Sunday, Saturday after rehearsal, my Beaver Sweetie and I took a moment to go to Lake Ontario Park and walk through the wooded area there and enjoy some of the fall colors. If you still have the opportunity to do that where you are, take a moment to go do that. You know, you might not have a car or anything, not be able to get to a wooded area far away, but there might be a park in your city where you are, where there are lots of trees and whatnot, and just take some time to enjoy the beautiful work that Mother Nature has done. Right? It's good for the soul. Okay. Could be a tough world out there, kids and cubs. So please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And now, at the count of 3, may I please have a Mr. Beaver cue the cock on 1, 2, 3. Oh, very, very, very nice. Thank you so much, kids and cubs. And, well, since you asked so nicely, I must oblige. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. Very, very brief news about some Canadians who have made us proud. The Canadian women's under 17 soccer team did lose to Brazil in their playoff match, and that's where their run at the World Cup ended. But still, a very impressive performance to be one of the top 8 teams, I believe, in the world. So congratulations and onward and upward for better things. In Paris, Felix Auger-Aliassime made the final of the big tournament there against Yannick Sinner. Lost in the final, but lost 6-4, 7-6, 7-4 in the tiebreaker. So Auger-Aliassime is getting closer to one of the top two players in the world. But by reaching the final, he jumped to 8th place on the rankings. So he's now the number 8th ranked player in the world, and also 8 in the season standings, which means that he might get an invitation to play at the ATP Finals, the big tournament at the end of the year with the 8 best players of the season, and he might have just qualified for that. So we might be looking for him there. Gabriela Dabrowski is already playing at the women's equivalent in doubles and won her first double match there with her partner Erin Routliffe, and hopefully that will continue. In Hong Kong, Victoria Umboko won her second title of the year in 3 sets, which is really good. And Leila Annie Fernandez and Victoria Umboko met in the semifinal of that tournament. So Canadians going deep in both those tournaments. In that tournament, so that's good for them. And also, kids and cubs, Marina Stakusic, who we haven't heard from a lot in a while, has played a little less this year, but she was instrumental to us winning the Billie Jean King Cup a few years ago. Won a tournament in Irapuato, Mexico, 6-2, 6-2 in the final, and that will definitely help her ranking. So Canadians making us proud left, right, and center. There's a whole lot more that happened, but because I got to go soon, that's all I can do right now. So amour et bisous, kids and cubs, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow morning. But if we are not able to, we will definitely see you tomorrow afternoon for budget special 3 or 3:30 start time. I will confirm tomorrow during the day because I still have to get back from Toronto first before I can do that. All right. Wish me luck on my travels, and I will hopefully will have a wonderful. Oh, I will have a wonderful time with the concert. Hopefully, the same thing won't happen to me before I went to Hamilton when I have to go to tonight. I'll actually get to enjoy the concert until we see each other again. À bientôt. Bye.